Okay, we're live. Hello, welcome to Cinema Savvy, and welcome back to a brand new movie review. I'm Chris Garner, joined tonight with George and Tate to give our review on probably the biggest blockbuster of the year. I just want to go ahead and say that. It is, of course, Avengers Infinity War, directed by the Russo brothers. For everyone who's worried about spoilers, this is going to be completely spoiler-free. Do we have a day that we've confirmed where we're going to be doing our spoiler-filled review?
We assume sometime midweek.
Yeah. So you haven't got to worry about anything like that. We're going to keep it as very brief and as spoiler-free as possible. I don't know how we're starting this thing off. Are we going to pass over to the plot, Tate?
Yeah, sure. So with Avengers Infinity War, possibly one of the most kind of hyped and talked about films in a very, very long time, the Avengers and their allies must be willing to sacrifice all in an attempt to defeat the powerful Thanos before his blitz of devastation and ruin puts an end to the universe.
What I immediately got from this film when it started off was like, if you haven't been following the Marvel films at this point, you're in it or you're not.
Yeah.
Like, there's no initial setup before, there's no prologue. Like, it is almost like a long-running TV show now. That's how I kind of see these Marvel films, like the fact that they all interconnect, they all lead on to the next one. From like trailers and stuff, like it is what it is, isn't it? I mean, it's a huge Marvel film. Like the scale of this one, even people say that Civil War was huge, and Civil War is a huge film, but the fact that this was having to balance pretty much every single character they'd set up thus far, and also setting up a brand new villain of Thanos. I know we've had like cameos from him before, but like developing his character, I didn't think they were going to be able to do it. I thought there was just like way too much character. I thought it was going to completely hold the film down, completely bloat it up, and there wouldn't be any focus in it. How wrong I was, and leave it to the Russo brothers, who are without doubt my favorite directors out of all the Marvel films. They directed Winter Soldier and Civil War, which are my favorite too. Another fine Marvel outing. I don't know where I'd quite rank this one. I think I still prefer Civil War and Winter Soldier, but I came out of this thing and I can't wait to see this one again.
I can immediately say this is the best, not just the best Marvel Cinematic Universe film, not just the best ever Marvel film ever made. This is potentially the first film to be near the Dark Knight in terms of superhero films. The enormous task of having, you like what you said, we thought Civil War was big, merging these characters on screen. Take your mind back to Avengers 2012. Back then, getting 6 people together was going to be the achievement. Now we've got about 26 people plus a villain, and this is probably the biggest film ever made, maybe on par with Force Awakens in terms of hype, fan expectation, the world watching, and I don't think it disappointed. I'm really trying not to say anything, but this was by far one of the greatest cinematic experiences that I think we'll ever have. I mean, this is a film people are going to be talking about for years and years and years to come. And it's going to be this is like that event type film. Like the Marvel, like I said, Marvel films are serious now, but you get the kind of the favorite chapters, and this is the one that everything's built up. Going back to Thor in 2011, there's an Infinity Gauntlet there. They've always pinpointed something for this to arrive to Infinity War, and we thought, oh, why aren't they doing Infinity War for Avengers 2? Because they set up, well, they wait, they develop more, they bring them in, and I think heading into this film, releasing 2 trailers, doing what Star Wars do, less is more. You need 2 trailers, but to show so little of the plot, even though it's a very basic plot, he has to get 6 Infinity Stones. They've got to stop him. We know what's going to happen, but they wanted to show so little. And in all fairness to them, it's worked, and I will give them a lot of credit for backing the spoiler-free campaign. Press screenings, fan screenings, everywhere they've been having messages about please don't spoil this. Even journalists have been told it. Never seen a film get this secretive. Yes, it's out now. It's out in America in a couple of hours. But for what this film, I mean, this film could have gone 2 ways, right? It would have been what it is, which is a great film. But if this hadn't have worked, then this is the sort of, you've said everything.
A ridiculous amount of backlash if this didn't work.
I wouldn't even say backlash. It would have felt like everything was wasted. All these years of build-up for something not to work. Like I keep saying, if this had been Joss Whedon, this would have died. Could you imagine now seeing what the Russo brothers have been like? Imagine if the Russo brothers had an Age of Ultron.
Yeah.
Now there's these ifs and buts, but they are without doubt the saviors of the Marvel cinematic.
I want to go ahead and say that this film was incredibly impressive. I'd say the thing that kind of got me the most was the way that it held all of the previous stories to their own merits and held the characters to their own kind of separate mini universes, I'll say it as. So, for example, the Guardians of the Galaxy sequences, or sequences that involved the Guardians of the Galaxy characters, felt like a Guardians of the Galaxy film. And that was likewise with almost all of the other characters. They managed to somehow balance that throughout the entire film. And in some films, that just would not work. It would feel joggy, and it wouldn't flow really as good as this did. But this was wholeheartedly one of the best structured films, I would say, that I've seen in a very long time. And as far as the plot is concerned, it worked. It really did. I got behind it. And, well, it's very, very difficult without specifically saying different events in the film.
Yeah.
But what I will say is the trailers gave us basically nothing in the grand scale of the film itself.
You got a sense of the stakes, didn't you? You got a sense of the stakes and like
but the stakes were up so much higher in the actual film.
Oh yeah.
There was so much more tension than I expected. And I was discussing this with one of my mates a couple of days ago. And we both came to the decision that this film is either going to be one of the best MCU films. It's going to be phenomenal. It's going to be absolutely amazing. People are going to go see it 5 or 6 times. Or it's going to be on par with Age of Ultron, and that's going to mean that people are going to dislike it because they're expecting so much more. And I was expecting very, very high expectations for this film, and not only did it deliver, but it actually outdone itself on those high expectations, which is completely unprecedented. It's amazing, and a brilliant, brilliant job done by all of the actors, the directors, the studio itself, to come this far and still put out a film to this quality, and to have all of the build-up come to this right here.
For me, like with the Marvel movies, like there's a good, don't get me wrong, there's a good chunk of them that I didn't really like Thor: The Dark World, more recently Spider-Man Homecoming, Guardians of the Galaxy 2 I wasn't even that keen on. There's been some duds along the way, but I've always said that with these movies, I kind of see them out of obligation now anyway, just because I've come this far. But they are usually always very entertaining movies. Even if I only just watch them once, it's not that I don't like them, but they don't really have much staying power with me. This one is the first one that I've came out of and said, like, I want to see this movie again. What I do want to talk about, and Tate, you kind of hit it there, is that this is about a 2.5-hour movie. We might get an extended cut. We might get a director's cut, because they did actually announce that a lot of material with Thanos did get cut from their initial... I don't know if it was their initial idea or if they did actually shoot that material. It's about 2.5 hours long. Really didn't feel like it. It absolutely flew by for me. The pacing of this film is fantastic. Going into this movie, and again, I don't want to spoil loads, but I was expecting long, sort of laborious setup for the first act, then getting into Act 2. Thanos is like in it right from the off, from the opening scene. The motive is clear. He's setting out to do what he wants to do, and the film pretty much picks up right from the opening 10 minutes, and it doesn't let up all the way through to the end. I thought that was really smart, because along the way, I thought we were going to have like a long setup of Thanos, and you kind of just thrown into it, but you get enough character material with him. You understand why he's doing what he's doing. And that's a big thing for me with Thanos in this. I was really worried this character wasn't going to work. If they completely messed up Thanos, kind of going to what you said, George, not just like the film not being good, but I think that Thanos is such like a crux of the movie. So much of the movie is about him. If he'd have been like another sort of, you know, regular Marvel villain that we always talk about, where they're really throwaway, this movie would have just completely fallen apart. And I'm really glad to say he didn't. He does have a presence. He is menacing, but he also, in a weird way, has a very skewed humanity to him, which I really liked. You can understand.
Chris, would you say, out of all the Marvel villains that we've seen, and we've had some really good recent ones, we've had Killmonger, we've had some brilliant ones from the very, very start, such as Loki, and various other villains that have been involved in all of the films, where would you two put Thanos ranking the villains? You put him top.
This is spoiler free. I can only say he's top.
In terms of Marvel, I would say Loki probably has more personality and is liked more by the masses, but it's done. He's not a threatening villain. Loki has never been a threatening villain. This is the kind of villain you want. This is what Ultron should have been, in my opinion. But but I would probably rank Thanos at the top because he's more interesting to me.
I think the most interesting villains are the ones that have character to them. So look at Loki. There's a backstory there with obviously his father and whatnot. To go to Killmonger, there's a backstory there with his family and whatnot. Thanos, I can't talk about his backstory, but they develop him as a character. And I think this what you said a minute ago, literally took the words out of my mouth, that this could have easily loads of setup and then started the film. If you go back to Avengers 1, the first half hour is them introducing.
So much.
Yeah, the first half hour is 5 minutes per character, introduce all 6, then have them meet. Whereas this, you're in it from the get-go. And it reminded me of Dunkirk from the sense that the opening titles hit and then straight away you're into something big and the film just develops off itself. There is not a single wasted minute in maybe 30 seconds, which we'll talk about next week, but there is not a single wasted minute in this film. Every single scene is there. The editing is on point. Everything is there that had to be there. And I think it's critical. It's still 2.5 hours. And this could easily have been 3 hours, 3.5, doing more if they needed to do more. There are scenes that got missed out that could have been in there and whatnot.
Yeah.
And I think for these guys to balance 25 heroes plus basically create and develop a villain as well was probably one of the hardest tasks a director could do. Yeah. And the Russo brothers have done it together. And they've, to me, done almost the impossible. Because if you go back to the Marvel films, you know, the original films, they always sacrifice the villain to develop the characters. In this, they didn't sacrifice the heroes to develop the villain. You've got these established heroes, so now let's make the villain worthy of being a villain. And I think with Thanos, with him, Josh Brolin's magnificent. He's very Josh Brolin, but there's not clunky. And the big thing of this is, do they need motion capture? I think they did to convey emotion from him. He's compelling. You learn more about him, and he raises the morality questions, almost like Killmonger. That Killmonger had morality questions, and that just naturally makes for a more interesting villain. But you go back to people like Ultron, who he was just way too philosophical, and then he had suddenly Iron Man's humor and whatnot. Thanos was his own character, and I think to the credit of Marvel for building him up for all this time, and it's all paid off. The reason we all kind of thought we'd get more of Thanos, maybe originally when they announced Phase 3, you thought Thanos might be in Ragnarok and destroy Asgard. You thought Thanos might crop up in Guardians 2. Instead, absolutely nothing. Everything came down to him in this film, and it's worked magnificently. And the best thing is that every single actor or actress that works with Josh Brolin in this, they come off on par with him in terms of performance. I feel like when you're watching this, every single person's giving it their best for their character.
I was about to say, it might actually be some of the best films or best performances of that character from most of the characters in the cast.
And immediately, I would say this is Iron Man's best performance. This is Thor's best performance. I can't not necessarily Cap, because we don't get as much as we do in his films. Basically, I'm sorry, I'm looking at the poster. I'm literally going through the characters now, where there are characters that have outdone themselves with less screen time than they've had in their own singular films, and I think that's a big part of this. Vision, I thought the best thing in this film to me is, well, except Thanos, is Benedict Cumberbatch and Robert Downey Jr. together. They are a delight on screen from the minute they get there. This isn't a spoiler, people. Yeah. From the trailers, you know, there's a New York subplot with Benedict, Spider-Man, Iron Man. You know that there's the Guardians with Thor subplot, and we know the Wakanda subplot. That's all I'm going to say about the subplots. But everyone that meets someone new, it was great meeting them. And
yeah.
It felt like
go on, sorry.
I was just saying, it felt like Avengers 1 when they were met for the first time. You had the individual character traits crossing over for like really good scenes, and every time this happened, particularly with Thor and the Guardians, it was almost perfect writing, perfect performances.
Yeah, one thing I will say, it's going to sound like a negative, but it's also, I don't know how else they could have got around it, because there are so many characters and you are having to jump around quite a lot. There are quite extended periods where you'll start with a character and then it'll be ages before you come back to them. But then again, because there are so many characters, you have got to like sort of go back to everyone, set everyone up where they are following their individual films, and also as the story evolves. So I don't know if that like throws the flow of the movie off in some parts. But again, I don't know how else they could have done it with the amount of characters, but they make it work for what it is.
But it's very interesting because this film is, I'd see it as a heavy action film. It's a film which has a lot of action set pieces in a lot of different places, but they still somehow manage to balance out the character moment. And I feel like almost every single character develops throughout the entire film, even though it's a very action-heavy film. And they don't really take, I'd say, too much time across the entire film to have personal conversations, but for the little moments that do take place in the film, it's executed perfectly. You wouldn't want it to go on for any longer, and it ties over into the next action area or sequence better than I've seen in previous Marvel films. Because when you have a film, I'll use for example The Winter Soldier. There's a lot of action sequences, but there's also a decent amount of talking in between those action sequences to keep the plot rolling. With this film, it feels like it's just really well balanced.
Yeah.
Just overall, a really, really well balanced film.
It's the pacing, I think. If there's scenes where they're talking, sometimes it's in the action scene where they need to do the talking. So I think you get a lot of that sort of Iron Man and Spider-Man. That's hinted at in Homecoming, their relationship. And it takes everything you've learned from these previous films and it just takes it one step further, which in theory is what the Avengers should be doing. I think Civil War did a great job with that. Obviously, that's purely Captain America because it technically is a Captain America film. But each character's come off better in this. I mean, there are some characters, I mean, not minorities, but the characters that were a minority, like supporting roles, like the lowest of supporting roles in their individual films. So kind of War Machine, he doesn't do too much in this film, but he's got his moments still. And I think that's down to, you know, War Machine was a supporting character to Iron Man. Iron Man is as much a supporting character to Thanos in this film that there's like, it's like the tree, the branches are coming off, but even the guys at the bottom, they're still getting their screen time and they're still doing a really good job within it.
Yeah, absolutely. We've had a comment from Auburn saying, do you think this film will renew people's enthusiasm for more superhero movies?
Yes and no.
Yeah, same. So I was definitely, I think all of us were actually. We were feeling the fatigue definitely last year, even still going into Black Panther this year for me. And with Infinity War, I was like, okay, here we go, another Marvel movie. But the hype did hit me, and it hit me the most the day before I was seeing this thing. And certainly this morning when I was going to see it, I was playing the Alan Silvestri Avengers theme like before I was going there. And it's like what George said, it is an event. It is an event film, and this isn't even the last one. Like there's Ant-Man, there's Captain Marvel, and then we've got like the next Infinity War part. I know that it was originally going to be a part 1 and part 2, but they've divided the titles up, but it's essentially going to be a part 2. But it feels like a sense of, without giving anything away, it feels like a sense of finality almost. Like we've been with this franchise for 10 years and it's been building to this. So I think people are going to take away from this of the potential of what can be created from like whether it's a cinematic universe or the potential that superhero movies can go to. I mean, if you look back to like some might say a more innocent time, like the early 2000s or anything like that, with either the first couple of X-Men films or the first few Spider-Man films, still great movies. But you look now at this huge universe they've built, and I think that's just testament to Kevin Feige. I think that's testament to Disney for having the courage to go through with this. So I think this will definitely instill. Superhero movies aren't going anywhere. It was an absolute packed theatre for me, and that was at 11 a.m. in the morning. It wasn't even at peak time, and the cinema was almost sold out. So I think the whole franchise and superhero movies in general are definitely still going to have an audience. But even the bad ones, people just won't see the bad ones. You know, Justice League bombed. If it's a bad movie, people won't see it. This is a good movie, so it deserves to make money.
I think that this film, it will probably prompt DC to have some kind of reaction. They've seen that now Marvel have all of these heroes in this one film. So what they're going to go and do, they're going to go and like make a Justice League Unlimited film with like 20 odd characters, introducing at least half of them into that film alone, and then have them fight just a one-off villain because they feel like that could probably work. But what I do want to say is the latest, I'd say, comic book film revival of the last few years, with I'd say Logan leading the charge as well, Civil War, and now Infinity War, Black Panther even, and Wonder Woman. I'll give credit to DC where it's only going to be ever used. It feels like there is now refresh and renewed life into the genre. And I know that it's still same, but it's just continuation. But with certain films, they're able to take the plots of them into different directions and able to take the stories to places where people wouldn't have dreamed of 10 years ago. And I predicted a couple of years ago that the comic book films would slowly die off because people would get bored of them. But when films are coming out of this quality, I mean, the genre itself can continue going as long as there is a good quality and good demand for the film. And this film has proven that they're not going to be going away for a reasonably long time. And they could keep this up. I don't think they should add in any more heroes than they've put in this film. I think they've probably reached the limit.
Yeah.
Unless they want to go up to 3 hours, 30 minutes, kind of Lord of the Rings extended kind of territory of time. But I feel like we've almost reached the peak of what we can get to. Here's to hoping that the next few superhero films keep the trend going along.
Yeah.
I have a completely different opinion. Deadpool 2 is not going to make anywhere near as much as Deadpool 1. Infinity was a hit, don't get me wrong. Infinity was a humongous hit, and it will be, and it will break records. The issue of comic book films now is that people are getting fed up with them. However, Marvel is the exception. Marvel is the exception because they have given it time. They've not rushed anything. They have built this franchise over 10 years. Wonder Woman is a one-off for not for Disney, for DC. And that was a hit, don't get me wrong. And Wonder Woman 2 might be a hit, but Wonder Woman was as much sort of cultural as in the sense of the event of, that was more of an event film, right, than the context of the film itself. This is the event film, and this Marvel is the backup of the quality going within them. I still think this is dying off. Look at the X-Men films. Logan is an exception, but like what Chris said earlier about Infinity War, Logan was a finality. That was the end. It was Hugh Jackman's last X-Men film. That's one of the big drawing points of that film. The next, I mean, X-Men, First Class, Days of Future Past, then they dropped off massively for Apocalypse. And if they hadn't have pushed back Dark Phoenix, that would make even less money this year. DC films are dropping off one by one, except Wonder Woman. They're going off. And I think now is that Marvel, I don't want to say it's a tried and tested formula, but they've given so much to the audience, to the world, that they're dominating because they're still doing up. And I think this comes down to the testament of the directors they hire. If you look at Thor Ragnarok, there's a massive, I mean, it's a massive film, but there's a humongous cult following within Taika Waititi because they've gone for these different style directors to lead different. I mean, there's almost different genres within the MCU, right? Mm-hmm. It's not just, I mean, you look at Guardians 1 and then pick randomly Civil War. You couldn't be more apart. Whereas you pick DC, there's a consistency within all of them. And there is a thin consistency within the Marvel films, but there's so much creative freedom of the directors that then like Marvel overshadow and just tick yes or no with, that the universe gets fresh because it can do this. If every single Marvel film was by the Russo brothers, dark, gritty story, they'd have gone off by now, but they aren't. If every single one was Guardians, people would have got bored of them by now because it's comedy, because they changed it. I mean, Ant-Man isn't going to be anywhere near as close to the tone as Infinity War.
Possibly said that Ant-Man might be closer to a romantic comedy, if anything.
Yeah, and
the Marvel universe.
And it's like a franchise that has genres within itself, and I think Marvel's earned that opportunity. You look at films like Spider-Man, as in The Amazing Spider-Man, them two. The first one tried to be the Dark Knight, making it dark and gritty because Dark Knight was a big thing then. The second one was post-Avengers, right? So they made it colourful, funny, witty, and it completely blew up on itself. Mm-hmm. DC, they just tried to make a Man of Steel film. The year before Avengers was a big hit, so let's get our cinematic universe going right now tomorrow. Yeah, people are copying Marvel because Marvel are so far ahead. I mean, they're calling it the first 10 years. Maybe it's the only 10 years they'll do, who knows? But they are in their own level now where I think the appetite for superhero films has gone, but Marvel is almost the extension of the olive tree, that they're untouchable and people will go to them because they know that they're actually going to be in for a surprise. They know that each one will be different, but keeping within that Marvel time.
Yeah. And people just love these characters. Like, going to see this movie, it was actually pretty cool. I mean, you got to see it like IMAX, like that crowd, obviously like an IMAX crowd, midnight screening. But even my crowd, like everyone, you could hear like little gasps from people when their favorite character came on. Like, people naturally like these characters at this point. And it's great that the franchise has got to that point. I'm trying to think of other topics of discussion we could talk about. I wanted to talk about the visual effects in this movie. If we can give like a section to that.
There was some moments where they seemed a little bit off.
Yeah, there was, I think for me, it was the scenes with Iron Man and other characters on another
planet. It's seen in the trailer.
Yeah, you can see it in
that colourful planet from the trailer.
Yeah. There were a lot of scenes like that where it did feel very green screeny, and you could tell that it didn't seem like there was any depth there. Sort of, it was like washed out and like a little bit hazy.
For me, it was a scene involving. It just looked wrong. and maybe that was because it isn't usually how it's seen.
Is this Spider-Man being played by Tom Holland?
No. No, I give massive credit to Tom Holland for this film. I think his performance was perfectly fine. I don't know what you guys are talking about.
It's just Homecoming as on like a deep personal level.
This is involving a certain Iron Man suit, and it just looked wrong.
Yeah, no, I think I know what you're getting at. We'll probably talk about more of that in spoilers, but this has kind of been a trend with Marvel movies since I want to say Thor Ragnarok. Thor Ragnarok had a lot of green screen. Obviously, I know it's going to have like, I'm not bashing the use of visual effects, but it seemed way more noticeable in Thor Ragnarok. And I think we both made a comment, me and you, Tate, about that. And that kind of extended a little bit into Black Panther as well. So I don't know if like as a company, they kind of like pushed all their money to like getting stuff ready for Infinity War. And they kind of like cut back on the CGI Rhino from Black Panther, stuff like that. I don't know. There was only a few shots, but fair play to the visual effects artist, because it is an art. It is very technical. It is very complex, the stuff they do with visual effects. And there is a lot in this movie, but I was like absolutely blown away with some of the stuff I was seeing in this. I was let down by some stuff, as you mentioned, Tate, but the grand scheme of it, it's absolutely just visually dazzling all the way through the movie.
I think another thing is that when, certainly in this film, when it goes to, it does location when they require location. So this isn't a secret. Everyone knows this. They filmed it in Scotland for a while, and if I was Scottish, I'm sure I could tell you what part of Scotland it was. But that was location, and you can tell that when they do the CG stuff, it's because they needed CG, not on like a Nolan level or anything like that. But this was very much, if we can get them in real life, we'll film there, and especially that would have helped for the choreography for the battle scenes and whatnot, especially when there's a CGI army, stuff like that. But
so
I think,
what you're saying is when they did the filming scenes in Wakanda, they actually went to Wakanda because that's a real place.
well, they just had a gigantic field, and it looked like the forest from episode 7. I almost said something I shouldn't have then, but there's a scene with an individual in the forest, and it looked like when Kylo Ren was going after Rey in episode 7. I was like, oh, it's the same forest. I'm expecting him to pop up.
There was even like a little bit of the soundtrack. I don't know if you picked up on this, George.
It was the eerie.
It was the Kylo Ren theme. It cropped up. I swear to God, when the soundtrack comes out.
So what you're saying is the Disney crossover event is coming.
What I'm saying is
the next Avengers film is going to be just called Avengers: The Force Awakens.
The Last Avenger.
Captain Marvel is going to be played by Daisy Ridley.
I wouldn't mind that. God, Captain Marvel, that's March, isn't it? Right, let's try and get this back on track. Is there anything else to talk about? This is probably one of the hardest reviews I've ever
Music, it was great to have
Alan Silvestri
back with the main theme. Bit of consistency in the Marvel soundtracks is always nice, and it's a great theme.
Yeah, it's now a memorable theme from a Marvel movie.
It's nice, right? And Danny Elfman, when he did the soundtrack to Age of Ultron, used it about once.
Was that the opening title?
I think it was, yeah.
Hey, don't diss Danny Elfman, man. He come out and said everything's rubbish nowadays. Was it Batman?
Unless it was his soundtrack that he made in 1989. Don't get me wrong, great soundtrack, but like, come on, man, like have some originality.
One thing I will say, the music overall, there's a certain scene where the music is impeccable. Mm-hmm. It really is. It grabs the entire audience, and that's just scene setting. In fact, I'd say there was probably 2 scenes where it did that, where the music absolutely stole the scene.
Or a scene where there's no music, where there's no sound, is the strongest scene of the entire film.
Yeah,
and I think that's a credit to the film itself, where they're not just doing the trajectory nonsense where there's something dramatic happening. They have the dramatic Hans Zimmer Brahms. They work when he needs them. But that sounds important to the sound effects, the action on screen, the music tying in. It builds that atmosphere. And when you hit that Avengers theme, I've been hyped this for a long time. But the last month, very more noticeable than it ever has been. And every time I rewatch that trailer when the Avengers theme is like that fist bumping moment.
Yeah.
And there is one individual moment, which is actually on the YouTube homepage, so I encourage everyone not to go and find it, where the Avengers theme will never ever be bettered, and a scene in the Marvel Cinematic Universe will never be bettered than when the Avengers theme kicks in this moment. And like I was at a midnight IMAX crowd, I was at the BFI. And I'm not going to lie, it wasn't the best theatre experience. There were some idiot tourists in front of us who just kept clapping like a seal every time someone came on. So I had to tell him shut up in the first scene. And someone shouted at him during the credit scene as well. But the one moment where it was like pockets. So when Loki's on screen for a bit, you can hear the girls like, "Yay, Loki." When someone's on screen, they're like, "Yeah, Iron Man." You get that sense of like the crowd are all there for individual, but overall. But that one moment was like Last Jedi with the Kylo Ren bit, where everybody was just like clapping and like buzzing.
Is it really bad that the only bit of any reaction, or the 2 bits of reaction from my audience, were one of the scenes that we previously talked about with the music being involved, and when Spider-Man came on the screen? My cinema actually seems to like Spider-Man.
There was a lot of clapping. It was when when we did Star Wars, those 3 were there together. Because everybody,
that is still my best cinema experience to date.
Avengers, it felt not more fanboy and girly, but Star Wars was like, it was sweaty. Everyone was pumped. That's one way of putting it. With this, it was they're not the crowd I would normally want to be at the cinema with. And there was some individual scenes where I literally was there like, why do you need to be making noises right now? Whereas Star Wars, they maybe did it 2-3 times.
When we went to go see Star Wars, we saw it in Leicester Square.
Yeah.
Would we recommend going to see
Infinity War?
Infinity War,
where I watched it, the BFI IMAX, the biggest.
See it on the biggest screen that you can. Yeah.
It's. I think one thing. I mean, they're telling everyone it's the first ever film to be shot 100% with IMAX cameras. In theory, that's the native screen for it, right? So in theory, you should be going there. Think about this. Christopher Nolan didn't have the first film fully shot on IMAX. I think Dunkirk was like 96%, but you have to see it on the biggest screen you can, especially when you get these individual shots, these moments of brilliance. But I also want to say the cinematography is great in this. That mixes into the VFX and what these guys are doing. The framing of the scenes is immaculate, especially the fight scenes. The issue with clogged up characters is you can't see fight scenes. I thought noticeably when there's loads of characters on screen, it's very clear to see who is doing what, and everything's framed the way it should be. There's no clogging like the Transformers where there's like 8 things on screen. You can tell who's who, and you can follow the action. And I think that's what the Russos have done the last couple of films.
See, I was with the Russos, like especially with Winter Soldier. To me, that was very shaky cam in some scenes, especially the scene on the bridge. And I think there were some elements towards the beginning of Civil War as well with Crossbones that were also very shaky. Obviously, like in the big sort of like broad action scenes like Civil War, they do pull the camera back, but I didn't have any problems with this film at all. I guess I
just had a friend text me a heartbreak, and they've just come out of screen. That's all I can say. Yeah, it really has. We've done very well considering what we can talk about. We can literally only talk about the first 10 minutes of the film.
Yeah.
I don't even think we can do that.
No, we can't. There's like a gap where you're 10 minutes in to 15 minutes in, and that's like where most of the trailer footage actually is.
I think I've pretty much said everything I can on this one before going into spoilers. So if I give my overall opinion, absolutely check this movie out. If you've seen all the other ones, you've probably already seen it. If you haven't seen any of the other ones, then you might be, you're going to be very confused going into this because there's no initial setup. Like, you need to be like 20 movies deep into this franchise before watching this. It was definitely a lot better than I was expecting. There is so much action in the movie, but like what any good action film should be, it's tempered with character all the way through. There are never any boring bits of this movie. It's 2.5 hours. It really doesn't feel like it's an absolute breeze to get through. And they nailed it. It's a compelling villain of Thanos, which was everything was riding on the success of this movie for me with Thanos. He's a great villain. He has a lot of humanity to him. He's an imposing bad guy, and that's the kind of villain that you want to see in a superhero film, especially in these Marvel films. Brilliant direction, and it's made the future of the franchise all that more intriguing moving on from this point. Would definitely recommend it. It's arguably going to be like one of the biggest movies of the summer, if not the biggest one of the summer. So definitely check it out.
I'd agree with that. This is probably going to be not just the biggest film of this year, but maybe in terms of box office, this may be one of the biggest films ever made. I'm sure when we do our next video, we'll be talking about the records it's breaking over the weekend. Let's be honest, if you watch this review, you're likely going to be you've either already seen it or you're about to see it. I actually wouldn't have recommended you to bother watching a spoiler-free review anyway. You should get off the internet right now because there are spoilers everywhere. It's like a minefield. But if you are watching, then you might have the same opinion. But I think testament to the directors, the producers, the writers, everyone that's worked on a Marvel film that stuck through with it. Everything's been leading to this film, and this film pays off a 20-film build-up. The fact that a series can have a 20-film build-up is insane.
It's never
across 10 years. Bond's
it's like Bond having
23 and 58.
It's
like
like
56 years.
It's like not having Spectre in any of the films and then hinting it for the actual Spectre film that came out.
It's like imagine like Bond was the biggest franchise, right, in terms of numbers. 23 films in 56 years. Here we have by the end of when Avengers 4 comes out. What this is the 18th or no? This is the 19th.
It's the 19th. Right? Yeah.
The Avengers will be the 22nd next year. 22 films in 11 years for next year. It's unparalleled.
Completely.
Absolutely. So, Tate, do you have any final thoughts on it?
No, I want to say it's an incredible film. You should go and watch it. Seriously, I feel like if you're watching this spoiler-free review, you're probably going to be watching it anyway. But seriously, stay away from the internet. What are you doing here? Get out of here. Go to a cinema.
If you know people that haven't seen them, make them watch a 20-minute video called the MCU Supercut. Make them watch that 20 minutes, then make them go to the cinema straight after.
I really wish that had a screened before the films. Like, can you imagine if they'd have done something like that? That would have been awesome.
Hi, guys, and welcome to the start of the film. Instead of showing the normal adverts about cars, yogurt adverts, and radio in your workplace, what we're going to do is we're going to make you watch a 20-minute supercut of all the previous Marvel films, key pointing all of the good moments.
It's like the ultimate previously on like a TV show. But yeah, no, so I think we've pretty much said everything that we can without giving anything away. So that'll do it for our spoiler-free review of Avengers Infinity War. We will be going live at some point next week, early next week. I think we're aiming for Monday, but just check our links to Facebook, Twitter. We'll have all dates and times and things like that once we know what we're doing. But we will be on a spoiler review next week. It gives everyone the chance to watch it multiple times. So in the meantime, there will be reaction videos from me. Tomorrow there will be Venom and Jurassic World going up. I don't think we have any other reviews planned before this point because, let's be honest, it's all Avengers this weekend and probably for the rest of the month anyway. Thank you to everyone who's been in the chat and checked this video out. And until the next video, we'll see you guys next time. Thanks for watching.